All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video as Jeremy Fowler has released names that the Niners may have interest in trading for before the November 4th trade deadline. We'll hit that next. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. All right, let's get to it. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN lists the following players as options at defensive end for the 49ers. And he's got an interesting list here. Rashawn Gary and Kingsley Enagbare from the Green Bay Packers. Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb from the Miami Dolphins. Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals. Arden Key of the Tennessee Titans. Jermaine Johnson of the New York Football ex-Robert Saleh Jets, and Will McDonald IV, who played at Iowa State, also plays for the Jets and was a first-round pick when Robert Saleh was there. So let's go through this list. It's an interesting list. One, there's enough names on the list that it tells me one thing. The Niners are going to get somebody. Okay, that's the first thing. There's a big question. Are the Niners going to do this? Are the Niners going to do that? What do you think? Are they going to make a deal? Are they not going to make a deal? Are they going to somehow find some pass rush help to help their defense? I think everybody knows at this point. I was listening to John Feliciano the other day say, you know what? They definitely need to get a defensive piece. They got to get a defensive front seven piece. They've lost too much in Nick Bosa and Fred Warner to not add a defensive front seven piece. And I would say they may need to add a couple of defensive front seven pieces. They don't have to necessarily trade for them, but they probably need to trade for at least one. So let's go through these names and go through these options and talk about it for a second. Okay, let's start with Green Bay. I don't think Green Bay is going to deal with the Niners. Well, I mean, we just saw Mike Tomlin get mad because the Browns traded Joe Flacco in the division to the Bengals in the middle of the year, saying that he crossed some invisible line and he's not a competitor. And they made some kind of crucial mistake that nobody should ever make. Well, okay. How's it any different from Green Bay than trading Rashawn Gary or Kingsley Enagbare to the 49ers? Now, I mean, why would you do that if you're Green Bay? Now, I get it. Green Bay traded for Micah Parsons, and they gave a lot of draft capital to get Micah Parsons, and they might be in the midst of trying to regain some of that draft capital. And there could be a financial element to the thing, which is why maybe Rashawn Gary's name appears on this list. I'm a huge fan of Rashawn Gary. Now, the motor blows a little hot and cold, but if you're just talking about talent, there's very few people as talented as Rashawn Gary. He's got a body that's kind of like a Bruce Smith. I mean, he's got to be all of 275 pounds, 280 pounds. I mean, he's a big defensive end, big guy, long arms, big body, very heavy. And he does I think he makes pretty good money. So maybe they want to move him to offset the financial cost of Micah Parsons' contract. Maybe they want to move him to regain some of the draft capital that they lost in the Parsons trade. I just say on this list, draw a line through both those Green Bay guys. Because why would Green Bay give the 49ers, one of the teams how many teams stand between the Packers and a return trip to the Super Bowl at some point? How many teams? The Niners, the Eagles, the Bucks, the Commanders, the Rams, the Lions. I mean, there's very few teams. A handful of teams potentially keep Green Bay out of the Super Bowl. And the Niners are one of those teams. So I really find it very, very, very hard to believe that Green Bay would send a good player or two to the 49ers at a position of need. When you see your competitors drowning, you don't throw them a life preserver. All right. I know that sounds cruel in real world, but that's pro sports. When your competitor is struggling to keep his head above the water, you don't throw him a life preserver. You don't. You let him sink to the bottom because that's what it's called. That's competition. That's real pro competition. You don't help your competitors. The Giants don't say, let's trade this guy to the Dodgers and let's see, we'll help them win it all. No. The Dodgers suddenly lose a key piece. Do you suddenly give them a perfect replacement? No. And the Niners lose a key piece. Green Bay suddenly going to give them the perfect replacement in Rashawn Gary? No. So what? So Rashawn Gary can come around the edge in some playoff game and keyhole Jordan Love and season over for Green Bay. I mean, it's just not going to happen. Now, Enagbare is interesting because, he's young and doesn't make any money. I don't know why they would consider moving him to the Niners at all. The Rashawn Gary, there's financial elements to the whole thing. And also, I don't think Enagbare is going to bring more than a fourth-round pick, where Rashawn Gary is probably a day 2 pick. You're probably going to get a third-round pick for Rashawn Gary or a second-round pick. He's a big-time talent. But there's a financial component and a draft pick compensation thing that maybe would make Rashawn Gary tradable. But at the end of the day, if you're Green Bay and, I don't know, the Chiefs come calling and the Niners come calling, who are you going to trade him to? You're going to trade him to Kansas City. You don't want that guy in the conference. You want him out of the conference. So the Green Bay guys, I got to admit, I'm a little skeptical. Of the Green Bay guys. Let's get into the other guys. And before we do, we should tell you 49er football this season is presented on the Krug Show by Sleeper, the fastest growing fantasy platform in the world. It's a one-stop shop. You get blazing fast news, real-time stats, group chat, season-long leagues, and, of course, Sleeper picks for daily fantasy. All you got to do is use promo code Larry. Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Links in the description. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, let's go to the other options. The Miami Dolphins are, have a couple guys. Bradley Chubb, is a more of an outside linebacker, I think, than a 4-3 defensive end. But they also have Jalen Phillips, and Phillips in a lot of ways is the perfect candidate. Phillips is big and rangy and athletic, and he's a difference maker off the edge. He was a great edge rusher in college, both at UCLA and Miami. The thing about Phillips is likely to be hurt before you even get to the playoffs. He's one of the more injury-prone guys on this list. Of all the guys on this list, he's probably the most injury-prone. So, and then Chubb's had some major injuries as well and carries a pretty high price tag. So I'm not sure if the Miami duo makes sense. I would prefer Jalen Phillips to Chubb because I think he's a little bit more of a fit in the Niners scheme than Bradley Chubb. I also think he's a little bit younger, probably a little healthier right now. But I don't love either of those options just because I don't think Chubb's a great scheme fit. And I think that both those guys have had injuries, a lot of injuries. All right, let's move over to Arden Key. Tennessee's interesting. They've got a couple guys. They got Draymond Jones, the former Seahawk, who is kind of a jumbo 280-pound outside linebacker in a 3-4. And then you have Arden Key, the former Niner. Now, Key has got an injury. He was inactive this last week, and I think it's a quad. So that would take him off the list. He's not healthy right now. Now, he might be healthy in a couple weeks. I think the price tag is going to be really, really reasonable. I think you'll be able to get Arden Key for probably a 6th-round pick. But once again, he's got a quad injury right now, and that quad injury was enough to keep him out. So that has to be investigated for sure. As I said, they also have Draymond Jones. They also have Jeffrey Simmons. Simmons' name is not on this list. Simmons is a total difference maker, interior player, but he may cost you your first-round pick. And I'm pretty convinced that no matter what, the 49ers are not trading the 2026 first-round pick because it's earmarked for Trent Williams' replacement. They're going to spend that pick on an offensive tackle. I would almost guarantee it. Now, it's not for sure because who knows? The draft process hasn't begun. They haven't begun to investigate anybody. They may fall in love with a corner. They may fall in love with a receiver. They may fall in love with a linebacker. They may fall in love with a running back. Who knows between now and April? But I think right now that first-round pick is probably earmarked for an offensive tackle. And I would be very, very, very surprised if they moved it. All right, let's move on to the last couple names on this list. So we've gone through Rashawn Gary and Kingsley and Enagbare. Don't think those guys are likely because of the Green Bay connection. I just don't think Green Bay is going to help. I like the Miami duo of Chubb and Phillips. I don't know if Chubb's a great scheme fit. I don't know if Phillips concerns me because he's so talented, but he's also so fragile. I mean, he's like a European sports car. It's like when it's out of the shop and looking great, it looks awesome. Man, you got to see my Alfa Romeo when I put it out there. When I drive my Pagani, it's okay, fine, but it's in the shop 3 weeks a month. Costing you tons. So that one would concern me, that you would trade something of significance for Jalen Phillips and that he would get hurt within a game or two. Then there's the Trey Hendrickson name. All right, let's move on to Hendrickson. Hendrickson is a free agent at the end of the year. So, and the price tag's going to be incredible because he's a great player. I mean, he's a great, great player. He's probably the biggest natural fit. I bet you anything the Niners are dreaming of Trey Hendrickson, but they don't want to trade that first-round pick. And then the Bengals are obviously not in sell mode right now because the Bengals just traded for Joe Flacco. Should they be in sell mode? Well, they probably should be, but they're not. And they're also a totally dysfunctional organization. And if, you could get involved in some deep discussion with them about Trey Hendrickson, miss out on 2 or 3 other guys, and then not land Hendrickson because they just dragged their feet in the 11th hour, and who knows, maybe they don't deal him at all. I would not be surprised if the Bengals played their hand of cards that way. If they had all this talk, all these rumors, and then the deadline comes and goes and they keep Trey Hendrickson. And then they still let him walk at the end of the year as a free agent and take the compensatory pick. It's going to cost you your second-round pick, almost guaranteed. Why do I say that? Because the Niners aren't going to trade their first. And if the Bengals keep Hendrickson, they're going to get a compensatory third-round pick. That's a pick at the end of the third round. So if they're going to trade him to a team like the 49ers, who's probably going to be in the back half of the round, they're not going to trade Trey Hendrickson for the right to move from pick 103 to pick 98. I mean, that'd be like one of the dumbest things of all time. What'd you get for Trey Hendrickson? Yeah, we traded him in the middle of the season. If we had kept him, we would have gotten a pick at the end of the third round in the low 100s. But we decided to move him to the Niners, and instead, we got their pick in the third round, and that's pick 96. And even if it was pick 85, it's still you're going to move from 102 to 85 for Trey Hendrickson? That seems like a paltry amount to pay if you're the 49ers. So maybe there's some conditional deal. I mean, Tim Kawakami had a whole breakdown of three different levels of conditions that could be put into a Hendrickson deal. And Hendrickson, I'm sure, would be a great fit. Why is Hendrickson such a great fit? Let's talk about that for a second. Well, obviously, he's a terrific player. But anytime you invest in a player from another organization, you get that player's kind of habits. And this guy, and the Niners have experienced this. Devondre Campbell didn't jive in the Niner locker room. Chase Young didn't play hard compared to how hard the Niners asked their players to play. Was caught loafing in the NFC Championship game. So his standard and his motor don't match what the Niners' expectations are. And that's just because some organizations have different expectations. Some organizations don't, demand that their players play fast and physical the way that the Niners typically demand their players to play fast and physical. So you just don't know what you're getting. What I love about Hendrickson is the motor is unassailable. I mean, his motor is off the charts. This guy plays with his hair on fire. This guy plays so damn hard. It's crazy. So that's for that reason, I got to have Hendrickson on my short list because he plays so hard. And so there's no real risk as far as that perspective. Now, he is a free agent at the end of the year. I can't trade my second round pick without some kind of a extension for a year. I can't trade my second round pick, who's supposed to be a foundation piece player for the next decade, for 7 or 8 games of Trey Hendrickson. I can't do that. So there's going to have to be some kind of an extension, which is going to complicate things and just make that deal harder to consummate. So I love Trey Hendrickson. Who doesn't? There's nothing not to love. I don't think the Niners want to trade their first round pick, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to have to trade their second round pick. And then it's a matter of, are you willing to trade your second round pick in a year where Bosa's out for the year, Warner's out for the year, and this guy's a free agent, and you have no assurances that you have him beyond this year. That second round pick is an awfully, nice piece of draft capital to just hand over for a handful of games to Trey Hendrickson in a year. You're down your two best defensive players. So something would have to come together. I believe the Niners really want Hendrickson. I believe there's a deal to be made there, but there's going to have to be some kind of at least short-term extension. Otherwise, I'm not making that deal. There may have been years in the past where I would have made that deal, a second-round pick for a guy who's going to walk at the end of the year, but not this year. Not with the needs that they have, not where their roster's at, not with all the youth on this team. They need that pick, and they need that pick to be an offensive tackle more than they need Trey Hendrickson to give him whatever he's got pass rush wise the rest of this year. Now, if you can extend him, even a short-term extension, now that second round pick's more palatable, much more palatable. Okay, so there's the list, except for the last couple guys. Let's get to the Jets. The Jets are about to blow it up. The Jets are going nowhere. The Jets, in the last 17 games with Robert Saleh, were the number one defense. The Jets, in the 17 games after Robert Saleh left them, and I think in EPA per play, they're dead last. So to say Robert Saleh's had an impact on the Jets doesn't even really speak to it completely. But the Jets, I think, make the most sense of the 49ers possibilities listed here. I think they make the most sense far and away. Let's talk about why. One, they're in the AFC. Two, they have multiple pieces. And I really believe that the 49ers need multiple pieces. And, here we're listed Jermaine Johnson, the former Florida State star, but he tore his ACL last year, I believe, and came back from it. Or it might have even been his Achilles, I forget. But he had a major injury last year and came back from it. Then they also list Will McDonald IV. They don't mention Michael Clemens, the former Texas A&M defensive end, but he's also there, and he's about 270 pounds. So the Jets have three different edge rushers of varying degrees that the Niners could have interest in. Jermaine Johnson's kind of a two-way player. He's good against the run and he's good against the pass. He's got a great motor. The question is how much agility and how much has he lost from his major injury? How's his body feel? How's he look post-injury? And that's a big question there. Will McDonald IV, I think, is really exciting because Will McDonald IV is essentially Bryce Huff. He's Bryce Huff, but in a younger body. Will McDonald IV is a freaky athlete who's a little bit undersized. Like for the Niners, they usually like their edge pieces to be, in that 260, 270-pound range. Heck, Bosa is probably 275. Bryce Huff was them kind of taking a shot on kind of a smaller guy. Bryce Huff is still, though, 6'1", about 255. So he's in that range. Now you got Will McDonald. Will McDonald is more like 240, 245. He's a smaller guy. But what I love about Will McDonald IV is he is a crazy athletic guy, and his get off is off the charts, and his ability to bend the edge is really, really, really good. And that would be my choice. It would be, if you show me this list, obviously Hendrickson's the best player on the list, but I think it's going to cost just significantly. And I don't want to trade for a guy who's a free agent at the end of the year. And I think it's going to be really hard to consummate a deal and do an extension and work out the compensation. And, could be a conditional deal. And then there's a contract, and it's just, there's all kinds of things going on there. The Bengals don't want to sell the season away. And there's, they're sending mixed messages, and it's kind of a dysfunctional organization, and they drag their feet, and they're not, you know what I mean? So there are problems surrounding Trey Hendrickson everywhere. But obviously he's the top guy on this list. Rashawn Gary is a major, major talent as well. But Will McDonald and either Michael Clemens or Jermaine Johnson, I think, is the route the Niners are going to go. Why? Because the Jets are willing to sell, because the Jets are in the AFC, because Robert Saleh has working knowledge of these players, and they have a working knowledge of him and his system. That cannot be undersold. This is week 7. and the trade deadline's not for a couple weeks. You may not get this player really in your building and ready to roll until like week 9 or 10. So it's the turn for home. You don't have time to teach a whole new system, and this is how we do it here, and this is how we see things here, and this is our. You got to have guys that have some working knowledge of your system. And those 3 guys from the Jets, Will McDonald IV, Jermaine Johnson, and Michael Clemens, who's not on this list, but he's on the Jets. Those guys know the system. And those guys, I think, could step in right away and make an impact. And I think Will McDonald, it's like, what do the Niners miss with Bosa? They miss 2 things. They miss a guy who can set the edge in the run game, and they miss that guy who can burn the edge on third downs, spread out those tackles, create all that space inside for their interior rushers, and make their D-line a menace. Well, Will McDonald, the 4th, can do that. He can burn the edge. He can really get up the field. He's really, really, really fast. He's got spin moves. He's got off-the-charts athleticism. He's really, really good and can give you that pass rush that Bosa provided. Then if you could combine him with a Jermaine Johnson or a Michael Clemens, now you've got that guy who can play on first and second down and replicate what Bosa gave you on first and second down. How great's Nick Bosa? He's so great that it's going to take 2 guys to replace him. I mean, that's just the facts. He's a difference maker on first and second down against the run. Well, Will McDonald isn't, but Jermaine Johnson and the other guy are. Clemens and Jermaine Johnson are 265, 270 pound, edge setting first and second down guys. They could be really, really good. And then you trot those guys off and trot Will McDonald on in some obvious passing situations, and now you've got Huff and McDonald off the edges. Now you've replicated that impact speed that creates so much space and creates so much havoc and opens things up for Mikael Williams and Yatir Gross-Matos and Kalia Davis and the Niners interior players. If you have those 2 edges that can really threaten the edge and those tackles really have to flare out as fast as they can, that's what creates the space. So that's what I would look at. These are all good names. The Niners would be better if they got any of these guys. But I'll say this, Jeremy Fowler has got this list of the following players, and the Niners would love to have Hendrickson. It all makes sense. I will say this. Hendrickson would be their first choice, but there's issues around him. Rashawn Gary would probably be my second choice, but I don't think Green Bay is going to make that move. The Miami duo worries me because of the injury factor. Same thing for Arden Key in Tennessee. Of this list, the guys that make the most sense are Will McDonald IV and Jermaine Johnson. I think you get those 2 jet edge rushers, and you could plug in Jermaine on first and second down, and then Will McDonald IV opposite Bryce Huff off the edges on passing downs, and I think you're good to go. Are you made whole? No. I mean, you've lost Nick Bosa, you've lost Fred Warner, but you've given yourself a whole lot more than you had. And I think that would be smart. As far as what's the compensation, I think you're probably going to have to move a 3rd-round pick. That would be my guess. Maybe a 3rd-round pick and maybe a conditional day 3 pick. I think that would be the price tag. Will McDonald and Michael Clemens to the Niners for a 3rd and a 6th in 26, something like that. Will McDonald IV and Jermaine Johnson coming to the Niners for a 3rd in 26 and a 5th in 27, something like that. I could see that coming together. But there you go. There's my thoughts on it. Jeremy Fowler lists the following players as options for the Niners: Rashawn Gary, Jalen Phillips, Trey Hendrickson, Bradley Chubb, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald IV, Arden Key, Kingsley Enagbare also on there as well. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Sleeper for sponsoring this video. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting the Krug Show on YouTube.